Sorry. So we had a slight crisis in my tech skills, in that I thought we weren't actually recording when it turned out that we are. So there's about 6 minutes of audio that we've already recorded that is now gone. John had just asked that before we started recording, so now this is me answering John. Yeah, I'm sorry. Apologies. I fucked up. The thing was recording. And rather than look like a complete doofus, I decided to start recording again. But then I've had to explain this all to you, so nothing ventured, nothing gained. We were playing a game of. I'd like to welcome OJ from PDC and welcome John back. We're going to have a three-way together, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I made it worse this time, John. So, yeah, we were playing. The goal of today's PDC podcast is pretty much OJ's design. He's suggested we do like a little icebreaker thing where we create some top trump cards for key politicians in the US and UK. Once we've done that, we might do some wild cards depending on time, and then jump into like the nature of democratic systems, the different ones that we know of around the world and how they operate, and then we're going to look at and speculate which one we think would be best for the UK and / the US. So yeah, we had covered the categories for top trumps. Sorry, OJ, I had you introduce this last time, but just so we speed through this. The categories in the top trumps would be charisma, statesmanship, longevity, PR footprint, and tenacity. And we were discussing the traits of Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. Boris Johnson being the Prime Minister of the UK, Jeremy Corbyn being leader of the opposition. Seemed appropriate to kind of square them off against each other. We'd kind of concluded that Boris Johnson would have the higher charisma out of Jeremy Corbyn because, to use the way OJ put it, and a part of charisma is kind of theatrics. And I think Boris Johnson beats Jeremy Corbyn in that regard. And there are other categories in which there are other aspects of Jeremy Corbyn's charisma which I think are covered better in statesmanship and longevity and potentially even tenacity, where I would argue that where he wins out in some areas, that's where they should be expressed more than in necessarily charisma. So I think where we were last was I think we all OJ, you generously gave JC a 7. John, you were floating at 6 and 5. 6 or 5. Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, and I was floating towards 6. Truth be told, he's definitely above average if 5 is the average. But I think Boris Johnson does certainly beat JC, and just in kind of media interaction terms, I think Boris Johnson has had far more coverage. I mean, he's been on Have I Got News for You, for example, and although you could argue that's PR footprint as well, which, yeah, actually, to be fair, it is. And John, I think you made the point of you've not seen Jeremy Corbyn on a zip line waving flags, which, yeah, exactly so. So we need to kind of work out a figure for Boris Johnson.
He's got
I have him about an 8.
We're going to the top, yeah. 8.5. I wouldn't give him that kind of 9 out of 10, purely because, in a sense, when he does his, to use the word again, theatrics and just kind of displays his charisma, it's almost in a bit of a bungling way. It doesn't seem sort of like full on and powerful. It's kind of almost a comedy sometimes. So yes. I'd kind of like minus a point for that. Yeah, on purpose, of course.
Absolutely.
However, I don't think it's the most effective when it comes to rating someone on charisma.
I take points away for that also. It's a good. He does it well. He performs that character well. It's just I'm not going to give him a 9 or a 10 because of that.
I mean, I wasn't going to give him a 9 or a 10 just because Donald Trump exists.
Well, he's not very charismatic, depending on who you talk to.
Isn't he?
Not to me. I can't stand to listen to the man talk more than 5 minutes.
He won, didn't he?
I don't know if it's kind of like. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matty, but like the way I see it with Donald Trump, for looking through sort of a British lens, is almost an American businessman stereotype in a way, which maybe adds to sort of our internal bias of of what we deem to be
He's
sort
a
of an
typical New
Americanism
York
of Christmas.
businessman.
Yeah.
I have a bias against New Yorkers.
I would, yeah. I mean, we'll get to Donald Trump and we'll make that pitch later, but
Back to these
yeah,
categories.
yeah. Like I think you guys nailed it with regards to why he's not a 9 or a 10. So like, disregard my statement. It's not important. This is not the bridge I need to die on. Next one is statesmanship, and I'm just gonna double check. Exactly, because I know what I think of when I think of statesmanship, but I just want to check what the actual definition of statesmanship is. Skill in managing public affairs. Okay. So, statesmanship kind of seems to be a bit of an amalgam between like charisma, PR, and competence, which we haven't actually got a category for competence.
Yeah, I mean, if we kind of like the way I'm seeing it is, you'll have seen programs like The West Wing and things like that, where you've kind of got these political figures who are very above board, that go through the processes and kind of respect the office that they represent. That's kind of the way I see statesmanship. Someone that's very sort of blue collar, straight down the line.
John?
I'm just reading different definitions here. One of them here says the ability, qualifications, or practice of a statesman, wisdom, and skill in the management of public affairs.
I mean, I quite liked OJ's take on it, to be honest.
I did too. That's just perception. Each person's going to see that a little different.
Absolutely. Here are my thoughts on it with regards to Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. I think Jeremy Corbyn wins when it comes to statesmanship.
Just offhand, so would I say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I don't think anyone can really argue with that.
Yeah. Mostly because just look at his history.
Yeah, all you have to do is kind of go back to, like, not that I agree with everything that Corbyn says, but the early videos of him when he's making sort of speeches or statements.
Yeah, I mean,
he caters it extremely well.
Yeah,
to the audience he's speaking to, especially when he's in the House of Commons.
He was very vocal against apartheid back when the official position in Parliament was not to have a position on it, or like at least not to publicly express one. So and like he has a long history of that, not just with apartheid, but there are like other examples of that. So like
yeah, I mean,
it's kind of and in the case of Boris Johnson, every time what was it with the was it the third or second runway for Heathrow? I'll throw myself in front of the fucking bulldozers, and he was nowhere to be seen after it was okayed. Like BJ talks a big game, but
I mean the die in the ditch comment that he's recently come out with is just kind of an extension of that sort of mindset in it.
Yeah, no, that talk is cheap, unfortunately. Whereas I think a lot of JC's actions historically have been risky, but he's put it on the line for the right reasons, if that makes sense, or for the right side of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like some of his positions that obviously I don't agree with. However, I think the difference is, and coming into sort of statesmanship, is when he's presenting it from a genuine sort of deep-held belief. And when he does so, he's not going over the top like Johnson.
Oh, and he's principled about it as well. It's not just a sound bite. It's a genuine belief. Yeah. Okay, so like numbers wise, it's a question of like where do we fall on this? Like, I think Jeremy Corbyn's statesmanship is definitely going to be a higher score than his charisma, so it's probably going to be higher than 6.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. In terms of Boris Johnson, well, I'll put him first because obviously we're all in agreement on that. I'd say maybe a 5. The only thing that's kind of saving him is that when he does have to put sort of a serious face on, when he's speaking with certain foreign delegates or delivering quite a large speech like he did outside his statement outside 10 Downing Street the other day, he can turn it on. However, that's not his natural position. I kind of put him at 5.
Yeah, 5 for me kind of just says average lukewarm. Doesn't fuck up, but also doesn't do any risks, if that makes sense. One is like actual disaster.
Yeah, totally.
So like, I mean, because I'm inclined to pitch for Boris Johnson, simply because like he has done.
You robbed my number.
Oh, were you gonna pitch for?
In this category, sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, just because like the times where like so the bulldozer incident, he talked a big fucking game, but didn't fucking deliver on it, and was moot. Like when like push came to shove. Am I right in thinking that also he declined to vote rather than actually give a vote on that?
I'd be lying if I said I knew. I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend to represent. I'm not going to represent that as fact. It's just there is a part like there's some memory within me that seems to recall that he abstained from voting, but I may be making that up. If someone wants to Google that, please do. So are you okay with 4, OJ?
I'll settle with 4. I'm not happy with it, but I'll settle.
I just think on the whole, like his performance there is more negative than positive, which is why I'm moving away from 5, which would kind of suggest a complete divide. I mean,
I can totally see the reasoning.
Yeah. So now we're looking at like statesmanship of Jeremy Corbyn. So I'm just thinking of some like big hitters in statesmanship. So like Tony Benn, for example, I would put up there as a 9.
Yeah.
And I don't know if JC is Tony Benn. I don't think he is.
I think obviously he's a very unpopular character in this day and age. Well, both of them, but David Cameron and Tony Blair, I think that they always kind of were straight down the line. They very rarely deviated into like sort of character traits. I think when they were dealing with the same issues, I think you'd be hard pressed to find Cameron or Blair ever talking like Boris Johnson has.
Yes.
Not with as much conviction as Corbyn talks, but I think they were very sort of prim and proper, English politicians in that sense.
Yeah, they were safe.
Yeah, so I'd kind of put them as a 7. That's my barometer.
Oh, what? So what? You think Jeremy Corbyn is closer to an 8?
Yeah, purely because of the way that he has never really disguised his thoughts, and then when he's put them across with the same presence and formalities as Blair and Cameron, but as we all know, Blair and Cameron were. I don't want to brand them as liars. It's probably not right, but some of the things they said they didn't.
You can absolutely call them liars, and I would argue they absolutely were. John, what are your thoughts on this?
You guys have more knowledge of things he said. Just based on my limited knowledge of him, I would have said 7, or I'm going to say 7.
Yeah.
He doesn't, like, for the reasons I wouldn't give Boris as high. Part of statesmanship, in my opinion, is how you handle even a mistake or something. For example, I loved the letterbox thing, right?
Yeah.
But when they came around looking for a quote from him, he handed tea. I loved that too, but that's not a statesman move, right?
No, I get you. And I see
when Corbyn had the stupid woman thing, he could have helped, as we talked about before, he could have ran with that, but he didn't, got it corrected. I didn't say that. That's a statesman move. He's friends with a lot of people who other people don't like that he's friends with. Not because he likes, the quote-unquote terrorists or whatever, but he's being a statesman about it, trying to build relationships. I would give him more of a 7, just based on what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to pitch an 8, and I think, given that you were as well, OJ, I'm kind of inclined to give him an 8. But
like I said, you guys have more experience with him than I do.
Yeah, I mean, like everything you've said, I completely agree with John. And with regards to getting things corrected when they needed to be, and his he didn't officially have a response to the branding of him being like a terrorist sympathizer and stuff, beyond simply restating his initial position, which was he was there as to facilitate peace,
which is fine.
Yeah, which is his
That's a statement move. That's the response of a statesman.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the thing that lets Jeremy Corbyn down when we're talking about statesmanship in regards to the subject that we're discussing there, the kind of terrorist sympathising part. I mean,
Well, he's
I
not.
think
He's not. He's
no,
not a
no,
terrorist
well,
sympathiser.
yeah,
First of all.
worded that incorrect, however.
No, no, it's
but
not. No, let me be clear. You're not incorrect when you say that, because that's exactly how a lot of the media has branded it, and a lot of political commentators have branded it. I would argue
Absolutely.
it's a complete misrepresentation. I would argue he is empathetic, but he isn't sympathetic, and there is a world of difference.
Yeah,
But
I
he
mean,
doesn't give in and fight a war over it either. He just sticks to his guns on it like a statesman would.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, my personal position on all the occurrences that have gone on with him and certain groups of people is that he's genuinely, I think, a man that does want peace, but I think he's slightly naive in the way he goes about it. Like, you have to speak to these groups. You have to. Like, Margaret Thatcher did with the IRA back in the Troubles, X, Y, Z. You have to open a dialogue, or it's never going to get fixed. It's just the way he went about it left it open for a lot of criticism. If you don't kind of really hammer down and make it extremely clear that you don't support these groups' aims, kind of like going back to Trump, what Trump did with the it wasn't the KKK rally, but those guys with the tiki torches, and there's good people and bad people on both sides.
What, Proud Boys?
Yeah, no, was it the Proud Boys? I don't think it was, John. The guys with the tiki torches, when they were like parading down the street and stuff. And
I mean, there were a lot of alt-right
Yeah.
groups there. I thought Proud Boys were there for that.
Yeah, I don't think that was the Proud Boys I'm referring to, but we're digressing. Back to what I was saying, it's like if you leave any sort of like ambiguity when you're making these statements, including condemning left and right or this group and that group, you're not giving yourself that kind of body armor against the media. It's going to be used against you. I think statesmanship is, in my opinion, in regards to the topic that we're dealing with, is kind of leaving no questions unanswered. Because if you do, that leads to speculation. It leads to the media taking a certain narrative, and they can run with it because you're not presenting that counterpoint.
I see where you're coming from, and I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, there are things I would comment on, but it would require spending more time on it than I think we actually need to. So, I do completely agree with you. There are ways he could have handled it better, but I think regarding regarding the notion of naivety, I think you're potentially correct. My take on it is slightly different in that, well, let them crack on. Actions speak louder than words, so to speak. So, the media can... I don't know if you've noticed this, but anytime Labour appears to be doing well or has pulled something off quite brilliantly, it tends to be underreported, and anti-Semitism resurfaces mysteriously, or some new crisis will appear. I don't recall when Corbyn became leader the fact that the Labour Party became one of the largest political parties in Europe, not just the UK, in Europe. I don't really recall that becoming major news. That wasn't the headline. The headline was anti-Semitism in Labour.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember that kind of time period that all that was going on. But I think what kind of took away from the sheer numbers being reported and the significance of it was because they make it free to join.
I think they may have made it free for students. I don't think it was free because I became a member at that time.
Yeah, I mean it's by no means or what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to detract from it. I'm just putting across the point that I think it was kind of underreported, but I do get what you're saying in the sense that
I like
it. But it's media in it. The media are always going to say, right, these lot are doing well. They don't agree with us to that end. Let's dig up some dirt. And I think that's been going on since the dawn of time. And just to apply it to Corbyn, I think it's probably not what you're trying to do, but it's the way it's coming across. Is I don't think that's fair to say that it is just them.
I wasn't trying to suggest that. I'm just talking with regards to your comments on his statesmanship.
Yeah.
I think some of the feeling that you're expressing comes more from media representation than the man himself, And it's really important to kind of make that distinction on this specific trait. We have PR footprint for a reason as a category, because that's a great time to kind of comment on that.
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
um, like regarding your comments, that would kind of be my. Just remember this: that how he is represented can potentially taint that view. Doesn't necessarily reveal the statesmanship characteristic. That's all I'm trying to pitch there. That's not me saying like.
No, it's fair
That's
comment,
not me saying the
We
media.
gave
The
him an
media.
8.
Oh yeah, but like in the interest of just the like, I didn't want this to just be the numbers. I also wanted to kind of discuss how we reached that conclusion, and I'd like it to stimulate political discourse on the subject, and I think it has done that very thing.
Sound like a good segue to PR footprint.
Yeah. Should we jump to PR footprint actually? Because
Yeah,
I was gonna do longevity, but let's look at PR footprint. So Boris Johnson has got one hell of a PR footprint. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it's huge.
I'm pretty sure he's got one of his assistants is a PR, like social media management consultant or something. I'm trying to remember now. He does have something like that within his entourage.
Well, I mean, I think Boris Johnson's the type of guy that he's not tech savvy. However, once he saw the trend of viral videos, sound bites and like things like Facebook shares and groups, he will have cottoned onto that early doors. Because I mean, just look what happened when he did the infamous zipline stunt. That got him probably more support than it did detractors.
Yes.
And I think he kind of cottoned onto it. He's like, I am the type of guy that can benefit from cheap little PR stunts here and there. I like him as a guy, like, for example, when he's on the television speaking, or when he was on Have I Got News For You, when he's kind of doing his theatrics, the whole tea incident, I genuinely think he is a happy fun time guy, and he capitalizes on that extremely well. We touched on it a bit earlier, I think.
Yes.
And in my eyes, he's got his PR down to a T. I very, very rarely see articles that not attack Boris Johnson but criticise him on anything other than his sort of political stance, or as we see nowadays, his failure to get the House of Commons to vote in a way that he wants, his control of the party. I think.
Yeah, but forgive me though, none of that has got anything to do with PR footprint.
Yeah, but well, I don't know. If you look at some of the articles that have been reported, especially in the last maybe 2 days, he's kind of lost control of that PR element. He's not leading the conversation.
Yes.
Put it that way.
I agree with you there, but like I think it's going to be unfair to kind of paint his PR relationship as it has been for the last week, when weighed against the rest of the entirety of his political career. Also, keep in mind he was a journalist for a time and freelance contributor to a number of newspapers.
Yeah, just like Winston Churchill has compared himself to before. But
what do you mean?
Well, Winston Churchill was a journalist, wasn't he, before he came in? And I think there's a quote of him somewhere. Was it him or was it another commentator? Basically, drawing a sort of parallel between Winston Churchill was a journalist before, got into politics, then kind of led Britain through this really difficult and strenuous time. And it was kind of drawing a bit of a parallel. Like, obviously, it's two totally different things.
At what point in Churchill's career was he a journalist? I'm just curious. Do you know? I'm going to look this up.
Google it.
Yeah. Sorry. Like the reason I bring it up is he was Lord of the Admiralty in the First World War. First Lord Admiral, I think. And so that's kind of why I'm kind of curious, like, when was he a journalist? Because it's slightly different for Boris Johnson, because he was a journalist while he was a politician.
War journalism. He continued his war journalism in British India at the Siege of Malakand and then Sudan during the Mahdist War. And
while he was Lord of the Admiralty?
I'm just opening the full...
Says here he wrote for the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah.
And the Wikipedia page, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm seeing quite a few hits, yeah.
Yeah, it's not something I want to get hugely bogged down with. It's just, the comparison to Winston Churchill, I'm kind of querying it simply because Boris Johnson was a journalist while he was a politician and while he was operating within the Conservative Party. Winston Churchill, I don't think was. So there is a bit
It
of a difference.
looks like he was a journalist for the last end of the 1800s.
Yeah, okay, so he won't have been Lord Admiral yet. Later went on to become Lord Admiral.
In fact, what a coincidence! I've found an article here about. It's entitled "How Winston Churchill's Work for the Telegraph Helped Him Defeat Hitler." Guess who the author is?
Boris Johnson.
Yes, sir.
That was a good guess.
Well, if you're going to compare yourself to Winston Churchill, it helps if you also big up the historical figure.
I mean, I'm not saying that he is a Winston Churchill type character. It was just
Yeah, no, it's an odd thing to get bogged down on, but like I think the PR relationship is different. So in the case of Winston Churchill, I wouldn't call that a PR relationship, whereas in the case of Boris Johnson, it definitely was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When the blitz is going on and
Yeah.
the rounds are flying, you're kind of not too bothered about what's on the front page of the Sun about your latest scandal and that.
Yeah, it turns out he does actually have a social media chief who it was in the news. It's Chloe Wesley. She was on Question Time, and there was a bit of heat over her because she called Tommy Robinson a far right extremist hero.
Bitch.
In kind of like she was framing him in a positive light, I guess.
What?
Anyway, I can't be asked to read the article. It's from the fucking Mirror, but the point is he does have a social media chief. Back to the stats. Like PR footprint, Boris Johnson fucking hands down beats Jeremy Corbyn.
I would think so. Yes.
Yeah. So like, and I like Boris Johnson. I'm tempted to give a 9. I don't know about the rest of you.
Yeah, I don't think that's far off the mark.
Yeah.
I was going to say 8, but again, it's experience.
Yeah, everything he does, it does tend to. Well, sorry, a lot of what he does and a lot of stuff that gets into the media, he tends to be very savvy in what he's doing. Like he managed to turn a zipline malfunction into actually being beneficial for him. Like who the fuck does that?
That conversation that they brought up, that tape not long ago with him and a buddy who was trying to like hurt somebody, and that was only for about a week. He got rid of that.
Well, I don't know if he got rid of it. Like that skeleton has come out a number of times.
But he seemed to just laugh about it. I mean, how do you go on? Well, I watched him and he laughed.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, you're quite right. He does seem to have been water off a duck's back. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, is this one where he was kind of trying to get someone battered or something?
Yeah, there was I forget who, but they wanted the address of a journalist because they were going to get beaten up, and Boris Johnson gave them the address of the journalist.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if he gave it to him or not. I just know he was saying stuff like, "Are you sure he won't be too badly hurt?" Blah blah blah. It kind of seemed like he was going to. Whether he did or not, I don't think was in that phone call.
Yeah, I mean, there's the other what if we're going to bring this up, the other thing to remember is like there's accounts in like people who were in the Bullingdon Club at the time of Boris Johnson and David Cameron, because I think they were in the Bullingdon Club at the same time, and there's accounts of Boris Johnson like throwing £500 into a restaurateur's face after they'd smashed the place up. As if to say, like, fuck you, I'm rich, I can do what I want.
I wouldn't put it past him.
And I think there's also an account of him burning money in front of a homeless guy. I can't remember now. But
I mean, I've always been very sceptical of those. They've probably done some like sort of rambunctious shit back in the day, but I kind of think once memories are that far gone and probably taken by alcohol and told by second-hand parties, I don't think it's good. Like journalism told him against that. But,
well,
yeah.
Let's be clear here. First of all, that wasn't so much a journalist gotcha moment. That was a memoir that was published. And in the memoirs, those accounts were given, and then that made the press because of what it was saying.
Yeah, fair one. I'm not familiar with the whole story,
in the same way that whole story of Cameron sticking his dick in a pig's mouth, that again was an account from someone's memoir of their time at. I'm trying to remember where Bullingdon Club is. It's either Oxford or Cambridge. I think it's Cambridge.
But once again, if you're going to write a memoir, you're going to sex your story up, aren't
you? Sure, but are you familiar with what the Bullingdon Club is?
Well, it's kind of a rich boys sort of dining club, isn't it, for the university they were at.
It's Oxford University, sorry, I've just double checked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what it is in a nutshell. Yeah, and there's numerous accounts both within alumni of the university where they've gotten into litigation issues with local restaurateurs, publicans, and shit like that. So to say it's just like a rich boys club, no, these guys do some shit. Whether or not Boris Johnson was involved in any is a completely different discussion, but it doesn't change the fact that this is a rich boys club where they act as if they're untouchable, and in many ways are.
Yeah, fair one.
Okay, PR footprint for Jeremy Corbyn. I would argue below 5.
Yeah, it doesn't pander to it well, does it?
Yeah, and I'm kind of inclined to say 3.
I
I
think
had 4.
the only thing that would put him on a 3 for me is the fact that he's totally reluctant, in a sense, to kind of combat the stories that are part against him, and it doesn't kind of go out of his way. I mean, it struck me the other day when I was watching on the news. It kind of sums Jeremy Corbyn up, really. He was visiting, was it a local food bank or something along them lines, and it showed him getting out of his car, walking up, giving his speech, and walking straight past the media, back into the car, and like tailing off. And I don't think that's because he doesn't want to speak about why he's there. I think it's more that he's not got that type of personality that does well in front of the media.
Yeah, I mean, I would also, yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with this assessment, but just as another example, like, it's possible he was wanting to get back to the Commons.
Yeah, fair one.
It's a crazy week in politics right now. Or was this before Parliament was back in session?
No, it was probably the start of the week, so we're talking Monday, Tuesday. So I didn't know when it was filmed.
Yeah,
so that it never grandstands, though. Is kind of my point. It never really.
Yeah, no, and like this is partly pushing me more towards a 4 now. Now I think about it, he does turn up in places where he doesn't like announce that he's going there. He just turns up. I'm trying to remember there was a recent string of protests in Parliament Square where he just turned up and gave a speech. Almost just walked out of the crowd because someone had spotted him and gave a speech.
Yeah, but surely if your aim is to kind of further your PR footprint.
Yeah, you're right. That doesn't count. Yeah, no, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, so what are we, 3 or a 4?
I'm inclined to give 3.
Yeah, John?
You're all too low. I'm going to give him a 4.
All right, I'll give him a 4 as well. So we'll go with 4. Well, look, I didn't want to be favouring OJ the whole evening.
Well, he does have a lot of negative against him, but there are a lot of support articles for him too. They just don't get shared enough in our circles, so it's not that bad.
For me, the key point is like, a 5 is lukewarm either way. It doesn't go one way or the other.
Oh, no, he's polarizing for sure.
Yeah, so he's definitely below 5, like for me. Do we want to look at tenacity or longevity next?
I think tenacity would kind of round it off quite nicely.
All right, let's finish off with tenacity. When you mentioned this category, what were you thinking of as like examples of tenacity? Just so I know what I'm working with.
Sort of like when he's sort of confronted when something comes the individual's way. How aggressive is the wrong word, but how driven they respond to certain things, kind of get up and go sort of attitude towards subjects, and when they are defending something, to what extent they go hard, like they don't leave anything sort of in question, and when they really get the teeth into a subject, when they're debating it or when they choose to kind of put it on a pedestal as one of their values, how hard they go at it and how consistent. I think. Sorry, John.
I'm sorry. I was just while you were saying that, I was just reading the definition and some of the synonyms, which were basically what you were saying. And as I'm reading the synonyms, which were, like I said, just basically what you were saying I read one and it was bulldog spirit, and I had to laugh.
Do you know what the British animal symbol was before the Napoleonic War, before it became the bulldog?
No.
The cockerel.
Nice.
Because we were loud, bombastic, but very little substance. Anyway, okay, yeah. So, I mean,
Determination.
yeah, I mean,
strength of will, strength of purpose,
all right,
resolution,
yeah,
firmness. These are all the synonyms of it. Like someone who, like OJ was saying, someone who really believes what he's saying and puts that forth in a very firm way.
Okay, so
He has tenacity.
JC wins this then.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Based on the definition, wouldn't even be a contest.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson's kind of like OJ said earlier. He kind of goes out there and he's all about the soundbite, wishy-washy kind of thing. What he'll say, what'll work, what'll go viral, what'll make people just be okay with him for the moment. He's good at that, but he's not going to stand up there and give an hour speech with, with passion behind it, knowing what he's saying. I would expect that more from Corbyn.
Yeah, and he's not going to get himself arrested either. Over it, if that makes sense.
He's also not going to be on a zip line.
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
I've just thought there, what a terrible representation I'm giving to Boris Johnson as what I'd consider a right-wing member on the group.
Don't worry, OJ.
Yeah, but
don't worry. Yeah, nobody listens. I was defending Corbyn and some of the other ones, and no one even knows.
But like the way I see it with with tenacity is like Boris Johnson he's probably got deep-seated like views. I think quite traditionalist. However, especially when he was London mayor, it became quite liberal and kind of. I think that's when he really.
He didn't have a choice though.
Yeah,
I think, pretty much the entire councilship of fucking London is liberal.
Yeah, but I think what happened in his tenure as the mayor of London is it kind of fermented this persona which was no longer direct to the point and fought for his views with sort of ferociousness. It kind of became a bit of a fine whining and dining, get it in with some laughs, put my points of view across that way. I think he kind of lost it. Whereas with Corbyn, he's always been direct. Whether I've agreed with what he said or not, the one thing I can't take away from him is you very rarely see him get not angry isn't the word, passionate, unless he's talking about something that is really close to him. And when he does kind of go on that sort of front when he's debating something or putting across a statement, you can see a genuine, not anger, but a will to
passion.
Fight to the back teeth for what he's saying.
Yeah.
And I think tenacity, in my opinion, against Boris Johnson's sides with Corbyn. I'm not going to give him a rating yet. I'll obviously pass it around the table.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, like, what kind of figure do I want to, like, what number do I want to give? Like, because you're right in what you're saying. Like, when it's something he's passionate about, there is underneath, you can tell there is a wealth of feeling and genuine, sincere emotion behind it, and he will fight to the back teeth to fight that cause, so to speak. But like, I'm thinking of like some of the most tenacious politicians I can think of, and Tony Benn again springs to mind. Sorry to keep plugging Tony Benn, but he's a personal hero of mine. So, like Tony Benn's, I don't know if you've seen it. It's probably his most well-known speech, but it was his speech regarding the vote on whether or not to go to war with Iraq.
Yeah.
And in that, and I'm trying to I'm drawing comparisons of that to stuff Jeremy Corbyn has said. It's not the same. Let me be clear. So, like, if Tony Benn's an 8 there, Jeremy Corbyn's a 7, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So that's kind of where I'm coming at for this from the figures. The question I'm kind of struggling with, though, is do I consider Boris Johnson on the whole to be negative when it comes to tenacity? He's definitely got political ambition, but that's not the same thing as...
No.
That's not the same thing as like actual usable tenacity as it benefits the populace, if that makes sense.
He's tenacious. He's tenacious when it comes to Boris Johnson, to his own longevity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, this is awkward if we're going to do this because, like OJ said, like he's doing a terrible job of pitching Boris Johnson.
What I'm saying is, though, that's since we were not really going to longevity on if we were going to skip it or not. I was looking at all these things and I was thinking about. I had Corbyn at the 7 too, but I didn't want to say that Boris was just a 5. If he was a 5, he would just be obscure. Look at the jumps he's made. Well, look where he's at now from where he started. You got to have some kind of tenacity to do that, and to do it the way he did it.
Yeah, which is why I'm
as the bumbling buffoon.
Yeah, which is why I'm inclined to kind of expand this concept of tenacity, because it's not just whether or not I think we need to make the argument that it doesn't matter whether or not they're doing it for themselves or for.
It doesn't really say, and the definition really doesn't.
Yeah, it's whether or not
do that.
It's if they want something to happen.
Synonyms are relentlessness.
Yeah, if they want something to happen. So I would argue if it's something that Boris Johnson actually wants to happen, he is pretty relentless.
I give him a 6.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree.
Yeah, I'll side with it there. Yeah, about 6.
Yeah, and then what do we think Jeremy Corbyn is? I mean, I'll put it like
I said a 7 also.
Yeah.
On a good day, on a really good day, when he's speaking about something that he really gives a fuck about, an 8. On an average day, and at PMQs, 7.
We're
6.
going with averages here, and I'm inclined to agree with 7. So 7 it is. Now we were gonna do. That's actually a really nice spread. I'm just looking at the figures. So for Boris Johnson, his charisma is 8, statesmanship 4, PR footprint 9, tenacity 6. Jeremy Corbyn on charisma is 6, statesmanship 8, PR footprint 4, tenacity 7. Like it's not terrible. None of them are, but neither one of them is terrible, if that makes sense. And I think
they wouldn't be in the positions they were if they were absolutely horrendous, would they?
Hillary Clinton. Oh no, that doesn't work. Actually,
no.
Because longevity.
She's Mrs. Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
If she doesn't marry Bill Clinton, she never achieves any of the things she achieves politically on her own. That's just the truth.
Do you know that?
She was nobody before. That's how she was introduced to the world. She was first lady before she was anything.
Oh, so her political career literally came off the back of Bill Clinton's.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, right. Okay. I'm just talking about her political career. I'm not talking about any other aspect in her life. Just talking about
she didn't do anything politically before she. Well, she was also first lady of the governor of Arkansas. But it rode Bill the whole way.
No pun intended.
Yeah, well,
and also,
especially
clearly not. Oh, I'm going to hell for that. I mean, we were going to do some US politicians and then some wild cards, but I'll be honest, I think we kind of spent enough time on this.
That was good for me.
Yeah. OJ?
Like, I want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. Just out of interest. Yes. Just out of interest. What were your wild cards going to be?
Mine was going to be AOC from the US.
All right. Okay.
Cortez. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad one.
Next time, we have save stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, like the idea. I've discussed this with you, John, and with you, OJ, in Messenger. But just for people listening, if anyone is, I do quite like this little game, and it's a nice little icebreaker. And I quite like the idea of when new guests come on, we can basically pick we can create some top trump cards for a deck, basically. Because it's a fun little icebreaker, and again, like, it gets us talking about particular subjects within politics. So yeah, I like it. It gets the juices flowing.
What was yours going to be, John?
I hadn't thought of a wild card, to be perfectly honest with you.
So I had 2. I had I wasn't sure which one I was going to pose, but I was either going to go for Dennis Skinner.
Good one.
Or Duarte, so the Roberto Duarte, the Filipino president at the minute.
Oh, Duarte.
Oh shit! Right, I'm sorry, I had no clue who that was until you said.
Yeah, I mean, that guy is fucking wild. I I'm right wing, right, but this dude is fucking. I wouldn't even call it like far right. Is an absolute fucking maniac. But yeah.
Is he just sorry, like not to like because I don't think people who are right wing are necessarily authoritarian because. I don't know if you've seen the Quad Compass where it breaks it down.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
he strikes me as more of an authoritarian than a right winger, if that makes sense.
He's like top end right, so on like both axes is top.
Yeah,
on the
he's
line.
hard right and way up.
But I mean, like the conviction of this dude when when ISIS had that kind of little sect that was smashing it in the Philippines and they kind of took over that city, Duerto went down there himself. And started putting rounds down, and I think that's fucking exceptional. However,
talk about leading the charge into battle. Fucking hell.
I do like that. Yeah.
He also, because they've got a pretty bad drug issue in the Philippines, which they take something that's similar to crystal meth.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the scourge of the country. And he was like, right, I'm going to start issuing guns out to citizens, and issuing cash rewards. For people that shoot drug dealers, and it's like, bruh, you can't do this. This is not how a nice, decent site is supposed to run. But yeah, the guy's fucking wild. But they keep voting him in, so it must be fucking working out there. I don't know.
Can anyone picture Donald Trump in his military uniform leading the troops to battle?
I don't want to.
Okay.
Oh, hang on.
Sure you do. That might be a good outcome for you.
Is this one of those? Is this like God Emperor of Mankind shit? Is this one of those 4chan things?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Give it. Hand it over.
There's another one as well. The like Jordanian sort of monarch at the minute. He led. So to sort of bring it up, but do you remember when there was a Jordanian fighter pilot that ISIS captured and they burnt him alive in a cage?
Abdullah II of Jordan, is this who you're talking about?
Yeah, but when that happened, he jumped up in his gear because he's a qualified pilot and he flew in a sortie to bomb ISIS, which I thought was pretty fucking good.
I mean, I know, because George Bush Jr. Was a fighter pilot, and I know that when he went to, I forget the name of it, but one of the aircraft carriers that was in Middle Eastern Sea that was doing sorties into Afghanistan and Iraq, when they did that big mission accomplished banner, I know he flew in himself.
Did he?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, well, there's no danger though.
Yeah. That's not the same as running sorties into Iraq or anything, but like. But like, it's speaking of like monarchs on the front line. Didn't like wasn't Prince Harry like a Chinook pilot or something?
Yeah. So Prince Harry did his bit in Afghan. He the first time he went out, it was kind of like kept undercover, and he just basically visited a few FOBs.
Yes.
Like did 1 or 2 foot patrols, and then kind of fell back until it passed the course. And once he became an Apache pilot, he was out there laying rounds down.
Was I forget the name of the other guy. Is he now the Duke of Wellington? I can't remember now.
William.
Is it William? Yeah, because they both toured, didn't they?
No, so William was a Sea King pilot, so he was kind of towards.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I know Harry's guard attachment. The forces that were attached to his unit for security were a regiment of Gurkhas.
Yeah, so
which tells you everything you really need to know about like which branch of the military is the most badass. Yep, Gurkhas. You can tell, you can pitch all you want about SAS and SBS and all this fucking shit. It was the Gurkhas that they assigned to protect him. Right, so are we good to jump onto the topic? Some very cool info, by the way, and like as wild cards go, I would have been completely thrown by it and would have had to kind of pretty much rely on you for guiding that one.
Yeah, I didn't really want to throw it in because I thought it's quite a niche guy to put in, so I was probably going to do Skinner. But
Yeah, I mean Dennis Skinner's a good one.
Yeah.
The Yeah, so the subject idea that you suggested, it was initially what type of democracy is best for the UK, and before we kind of like start discussing that, I thought we should like discuss the various types of democracies that we're familiar with and some that we're not familiar with. I've got some information up already to kind of help guide the discussion a little if any of us are lost, and then kind of talk about how it relates to the UK and US, if that's okay with both of you.
Yeah, I'm up in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to ask you actually, OJ, what was the reason that that was on your mind? Because was it something related to the current state of UK politics? I take it.
Yeah, the way I see it at the moment is UK politics it's in a bit of a strange place, in the sense that we're in between a halfway house, because what we've got now is Westminster democracy, I believe it's like a kind of subsection, um, where we've obviously got the Parliament House, Commons, House of Lords, and obviously the monarchy that kind of oversee it in archaic terms. But I just think it's so outdated, for the kind of the world that we're living in now, and the kind of divergence of opinion that we've got. I don't really think that our democratic system is effective. Um, so I just wanted to throw it out there as a kind of.
So you're saying, like, so just so I understand it, you think that, like, the first past the post system, for example, in
Well, yeah,
it,
proportional representation in my mind is a favourable system to the one we have now.
okay,
But there's a few things going on there because in my eyes as well, I, I'm not going to lie, I'm a royalist. I like having the royal family about. However, whether I want them to still be included in sort of our political, decision-making system it's a toss-up. And
okay,
the kind of tribalism that I see
yeah.
now, because
Can I
let's be
can
honest.
I ask you
Sorry,
something
carry on,
else?
mate.
Just you saying you're a royalist. Are you comfortable with the police force and the armed services swearing an oath of loyalty to the monarchy and not the state?
Yeah, 100%.
You're
Because I think, yeah,
you're okay with that?
yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Because the way I see it
Yeah,
is
I would
you
argue you're
can't have,
definitely a royalist.
yeah, the way I see it is if the state controls, like, not to sort of be an accelerationist or anything like that, but if sort of Parliament did dissolve and people went, full on civil war down party lines in a sense, what is the third actor that would be able to impartially kind of subdue it? And I think if you don't have that third party involved that should be apolitical, then
Oh, and
you get,
you feel that that role is served by the monarchy?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more or less, and via crown servants and armed forces on police, it's there to act as they swear an oath to the crown, in my
Yeah,
eyes,
yeah.
in order to defend against any sort of massive injustice that could be brought about
The
by the
state.
House of Commons and Lords. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a solid argument. It's not one I like. I'm not. It's not one I'm like care to pick apart. If that makes sense. I was just kind of curious where you stood on it. And yeah, that's as good a reason as any. Well, actually, it's a better reason than most.
Well,
Well, generally, when I ask people that question, they tend not to have an answer to it.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so well done. um, um,
One gold star awarded to me, I think that is it.
That's high praise.
uh, like yeah, yeah, it is high praise because you've clearly given it some thought. It's not my position. Don't get me wrong, but it's also not a position I feel that like. There's no point in arguing with it because that's not the point of this discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the So you would prefer something that lent more towards proportional representation as opposed to um, the first past the post system, and that you have an executive branch that is essentially the majority government that has to hit a particular quota. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, my ideas aren't concrete on this, but the way I see it is that the way we have it at the minute in Parliament is, I don't know what the smallest constituency is in the UK. I don't know if there's
Good
any
question.
sort of buffs here that can, but kind of their vote, if they vote in the majority of one party, elects them one seat compared to, say, a constituency of 250,000 that is divided by one vote potentially, yet they get equal representation.
Islington North is the smallest. That's
Yes.
per area. It's in London.
Yeah, so
And that's
Jeremy Corbyn's, isn't it? Not
yeah, that is Jeremy Corbyn's.
Yeah. So the way I see it is kind of we need to kind of address the balance. They talk about a north-south divide in the country, don't they? And it's obvious from my accent what part of the country I'm from.
Yes.
But I kind of see it that we need to get a general consensus. Whether that's proportional representation could be, whether it was an idea we floated obviously before stream, where people kind of put themselves forward for election that are not aligned to a party, and then once they all get into the House of Commons, they kind of section off into sort of belief systems. I don't know. I think it's something that does need to be discussed though, because the way that our democracy works at the minute, I don't think it accurately reflects the will of the people. I know it's a shit phrase to use, but that's the way I see it.
You don't feel it is representative of the Vox Populi. I'm inclined to agree. What about you, John? I'm just thinking in terms of like the US. Do you feel that the US
exactly? Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that the best yet flawed, heavily flawed system is out there. The one that I live in here, and we have tried to spread this system across the world. People keep saying no. I don't get it, but yeah, that's kind of the one I like and know. I'm really I'm right on most of this.
Yeah, sorry. I do have a couple of queries, and we have semi-touched on this before we streamed. This one we didn't touch on, but am I right in thinking that when they do redistricting, is that purely in relation to candidates for the Senate, or is that candidates for the House?
Geez, I'm not sure.
I have a sneaking suspicion it's just the Senate.
I think it's just the Senate, because I think House seats are statewide. They don't really.
Yeah.
There's not like a House representative for a district, but there are Senate districts.
Yes. No. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it's for just the Senate.
Yeah.
That's that gerrymandering thing, right?
Well, and also redistricting, which is a trick that because I think it's the Senate has the right to rezone district do zone redistricting. Well, a similar thing has happened in the UK where I think the local
helps you keep your seat.
Yeah. Essentially, you'll cut up the different boroughs into different sizes of like for which councilman represents that person. I think for Senate House members, it's the same in the US or similar at any rate. Which the reason I wanted to clarify that is because I just wanted to make sure that doesn't actually have any bearing on the conversation we're going to have. But what I did want to check, and I have yet to check, and I'm in the process of doing now, is with regards to how you select House members, that boils down to you have a system called the Electoral College, is that correct?
I believe that's only for presidential elections.
Yeah, we're referring to... Yeah, but the presidential elections also determine House seats, don't they?
No.
No, okay. Oh, so you just have an election for who becomes executive, then you have the judiciary, then you have the legislative, which is the House and Senate.
The president nominates judges, but they still have to be approved through Congress, which is the House and the Senate.
Yeah, okay.
But all of those seats are elected seats through regular one vote, one person kind of a deal. The presidential election works through the Electoral College.
Okay, so it's kind of going to make this conversation a little bit awkward because it's going to be a little difficult to take notion, because what you'd have to do for the UK is introduce. Well, first of all, we'd have to become a republic.
Right. It's weird for the UK. So for the UK, the way you do it is you vote for the party, then the party puts the prime minister in there, which would be our president.
Yes.
So to do it our way, you would your voting for the party would be almost like meaningless. You would just each party would put forward a few people, like the Tories would put together their best 2-3 people.
Well,
Labour would put together, and then you'd
no,
vote for the individual.
I'd suggest if we were to do that, it would be exactly as Parliament is today, except that the head of state is not decided by number of seats in Parliament. It's decided by a separate election, essentially the president.
Yeah, basically a general election for the head of state, right?
Yes. So
That would be it.
the executive would be kind of like, this is the direction I want the country to go. It's down to Parliament.
The fun
to
part
pull it
is that exactly, and then that person is kind of more like a. It doesn't matter which seat. Like right now, the Democrats control the House. They have the most seats, but they're not the president. So it really doesn't. It's weird that way.
So my question is, should we make this conversation about how we decide a head of state, or how we decide how Parliament represents the views of the people? Because I think OJ's intention was regarding how government should represent
Should
the
form.
interests of the people. Yeah, is that
Yeah,
correct?
from my point of view, the crux of the argument is how the people that are supposed to represent us get into power, and whether we can actually trust what they say and what they're going to do when they get to Parliament. Because we've all heard the term career politicians, right?
Yes.
And I think we kind of need to get out of that sort of
Term limits you're talking about.
Yeah, term limits in a sense, but we need to get out of the idea that people choose this as a job. I mean, I think, in my opinion,
I understand exactly what you're saying.
When you're in Parliament and you are effectively representing your constituencies, you shouldn't be thinking of the pay packet you're receiving. And let's not, be shy about it. They're earning a lot of money, these MPs.
Yes.
Some of them that are doing next to fuck all, like backbenchers that hee-hawing and never really represent the community.
Yep.
Maybe they won't get voted in again, but 75 grand for what could be 4 years. So a lot of money, that. And
Yep.
I also think that the tribalism, people tend not to say what they think, because if they go against, like we saw with Boris Johnson, let me just stipulate, I don't disagree what he did by kicking out the rebels.
Mm-hmm.
Other people may. That's my personal point of view. However, if you go against your party, that's more or less your job done coming the next general election, due to tribalism of the voters in your area. With all of the Labour safe seats, Conservative seats.
Sorry, can I just clarify, because your position seems to be somewhat inconsistent here. You think Boris Johnson getting rid of party members who didn't toe the party line is justified, but also at the same time you don't want tribalism in politics.
Yeah, it's justified in the sense that the aim that it's trying to achieve, I agree with.
Under what you're trying to correct here, which is like addressing issues of tribalism in Parliament, would you still feel the same way?
Not in that sense, because it's in a different context.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that. I was struggling to understand why you'd brought those two things up.
It's just
but
in the context
I see it now. Don't worry.
Yeah, sorry. As I said, the way that things are at the minute, and obviously we're in uncharted territory here. I think that's the only way he can kind of sort of bring together his party members and try and form a consensus. But we wouldn't have this problem,
He's
in
playing
my
the
opinion.
game.
Yeah, exactly. It's politicking. And that's what both sides of the house do at the minute.
Yeah.
And I think we just eliminate this ridiculous game where people are invoking acts of parliament that were written, centuries ago. Like, there's no need for it. I think we need to have a full rehaul. I'm not talking about like an Athenian democracy in the sense where everyone has one say, because nothing will get done.
Sorry, I hate the need to correct you there. The Athenian democracy relied on the fact that women didn't have the right to vote, and there were free slaves to every free man.
Yeah, and also you could,
which is why they had the time to sit around and talk about this shit.
And you couldn't run for election if you hadn't served as an adult, teenage male in the army. But that's by the by. It's kind of the.
I think that was just a number of city-states, but I get where you're coming from, and yes.
Yeah. I think we just need a bit more. Honestly, I think the only way we'd get that is if people weren't kind of banking on the name of the party to get them elected.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, this is precisely how the SNP came to be. Labour relying on the Scottish vote. It wasn't until Scotland were given a viable alternative, a tangible alternative in the form of the SNP, that Labour got dethroned, so to speak. And I use that term quite deliberately because, given how archaic our system is, that is kind of appropriate.
Yeah, so how would you see it, John, from like your point of view? Obviously, you're sat in a different system to us. Would you prefer the system you had or ours? And if you put it this way, John, if you were given the reins of control to
Oh God,
sort of manage
it'd be a
the
bad
UK,
day, but go ahead.
to just totally swipe off the democratic system in the UK, how would you rebuild it from your point of view?
Jeez, I'd give a lot more freedom of speech. I value that a lot, very, very highly. I'd get rid of all the hate speech laws. That's the first thing I'd do. I don't know a lot about, like, I'm still kind of learning how your system of government works. It's weird to me, right? Like Matt said, how the power comes from the
monarch,
the nobility and all, the
Yeah.
monarchy. That doesn't really compute
Yeah,
to me. I didn't grow up that way.
John, it doesn't
easiest way
compute to me either.
I mean, the easiest way I could probably describe it is like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we used to be a complete monarchy. And
Oh, I know that. I understand. I
Yeah,
understand
no,
the
I'm
history
sorry,
of
I'm
your
not
country
trying.
very
Yeah, I'm not.
well.
John, I'm not trying to insult you. Just that came across incorrect. But it's kind of after the Magna Carta, there was certain bits that should have been taken out that weren't, and that's why we get people invoking ridiculously all that. So, like, I reckon scrap it off me. I reckon just restart from a clean slate. Would you do what you have over there, so sort of like a republic, or?
I mean, there's a lot of chances to get it right. We have flaws in our system too. God, I don't know. You're asking. That's a big question to say what would be the best way to run a country. I'd probably take bits and pieces from all over.
Yeah, I mean, the question, I think the spirit of what's being asked here is, what is the best way for the maximum amount of people to be most appropriately represented in how the state operates?
Huh.
Put very eloquently. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've studied a lot of political sciences, so I'm down with it.
I think he made a good point in that aspiring to have politics be a career choice puts off the entire aim. There's a wonderful bit that John Oliver did when he was on The Daily Show way back when he was guest hosting about when he was trying to get us to ban our guns here, which happens quite a bit. And he went over to Australia and talked to their politicians, and part of the joke he made was, the politicians who did this, who did the whole gun thing in Australia, took them all the way after that massacre, there were a lot of them whose constituents did not want them to do it. And they lost their political careers over doing the right thing, to their mind anyway. That, I think, was the original intention of what these people were supposed to be. They now look out for their careers more. I'll do this so I'll get the votes I need to stay in this job.
Yeah.
And they're representing themselves first. Like he talked to an American politician when he was doing the bit, and he said, "What's a politician's first responsibility?"
John,
and the man answered, "Getting reelected."
Sorry, in response to that, I just wanted to clarify something, because really the issue here seems to be the amount of money involved in like lobbying and campaigning. If you get rid of that, your only source of finances is your constituency, and if there is a better way to vote than money, I don't know what else there is. So if constituents as individuals can back their candidates, and you can put financial limitations on how much each constituent can financially back someone, is that not fairer than if would that not be a better representation?
Fucked us over not long ago.
Sorry, say that again.
There was a case. I don't know if you've heard of Citizens United.
Yes.
And that kind of screwed a lot of things up not long ago.
Yes.
Not that it was good before that either, but
yeah,
it got
like,
a lot worse.
I'm right in thinking that Citizens United was a way of trying to address the amount of lobbying money that was backing presidential runs,
and that
right?
People get around individual contributions by putting money into PACs, and now
the CPAC shit, yeah,
it's
okay,
out of control.
Yeah.
The amount of money you can funnel through these organizations is just ridiculous.
Right,
but lobbying is huge nowadays.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up though is because your main issue there seems to be them pandering to their major donors. It's not so much that they're career politicians; it's that they're pandering to their financial backers. So my question is, why do you want to get rid of career politicians and not get rid of, which doesn't actually seem to be the root of the problem. It seems to be a byproduct of the problem, when the problem would seem to be the amount of money in lobbying and donor financing. Does that make sense?
Well, the question makes sense. I'm trying to come up with an answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I'd communicated that correctly. Because, I mean, do you disagree with that sentiment?
Well, in a little bit, because even though yes and no, I agree that they do bow to their backers in a lot of cases, but at the same time, if they make a move so wildly unpopular with their constituents, they still get voted out. So they have to make a choice, and they have to kind of walk that fine line, or try to sell their constituents on why they're making the right move.
My problem with that, though, is where is George Bush now?
On a golf course somewhere, I imagine.
No president has a political career after president.
Yeah. What do they do?
They don't do anything.
Well, no, they tend to get put on company boards.
Right, but that's
by their financial backers.
The top guy I'm talking about.
No, no, John. The same is true of congressmen. The same is true of senators.
Yeah, but not at that level.
I mean, like
you're right. Some of them do get a lot of jobs afterwards. Like, turn up the CEO of some company after they retire from Congress or something like that.
Inexplicably.
Yeah, inexplicably, I know.
So my point there is that the issue.
I have seen that.
Yeah, the issue there is your career is not in politics. Your career is in the friends you make on your journey in politics.
Yeah, but in fairness, Matt, that can be said for a lot of things.
I completely agree, but to me, that's the actual issue.
Yeah, that is the issue, but
sorry, John doesn't think it's that
not
issue.
Just.
I think it's an issue. I just said you can't stop it. Think of the scenario you just outlined. What stops that?
That's a good question. Well, there was a thing that they used to do in ancient Greece, which was free meals for life, which they used to give veteran soldiers. Maybe something like that. So basically,
they have to give up.
So basically, after your political career is over, you retire, you get a pension that you can live off, and you never go into politics or business again.
But if you do, then you lose that.
I would argue you legally can't, if you'd want this to work.
So you sign up.
Effectively, what we're dealing with though is corruption in a sense.
Yeah.
But corruption's always going to occur unless certain checks and balances are put in place. Now, there was something I was looking at the other day when obviously we started floating this idea about discussing types of democracy, and so you're familiar with the judicial process. Obviously, you'll be Matthew, but I'll just give John a bit of background.
Go on.
So, John, when we get a judiciary in the UK for a Crown Court, you're kind of sentenced guilty or not guilty by a jury, and it's 12 members of society that are randomly plucked to sit on a bench. And if you're the accused, you put your point across, the prosecution puts theirs across, and the judiciary at the end of the day decide whether you're guilty or not guilty based on the evidence given to you. And I looked at that in a political system, and it's got a name. It's called sortition.
Yes. Yes.
And in effect, people put themselves forward under certain criteria, i.e., you're not to be a convicted criminal. You haven't got major financial interests in, like, for example, companies that contract into government X, Y, Z. And I think as a political system, democratic system, it's got many downfalls. However, it's probably the most accurate way to kind of get representatives from each community that will further the will of the people, in a sense, because these people are there to earn money. They just put themselves forward.
Well, no, they're summoned
from a cast of thousands.
They're not. They don't offer themselves up for selection. You're mandatory. It's jury duty, John. It's the same in the US.
But in sortition,
Chaps, you're going to lose me here in a second.
Why is that?
In the democratic,
I'm going to leave my house. It's going to cut the connection.
Oh, okay, fair. Well,
I'll be back in 10 minutes.
well, to be honest with you, I've got to go in like 10 minutes as well. So, like, if we're still going, we'll let you know. But I doubt I am. I mean, I'm
Okay.
happy to continue this later, but you're gonna have to give me about 40 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
to finish my point,
Yeah, go on.
sortition in sort of a democratic sense would be you are not allowed to have massive financial interests in large companies. You're not allowed to be a career criminal, sort of say. 3 points to a drive license don't matter. However, serious crime does. They put themselves forward just to tick in a box. That could be the scope to do it. And then the random ballot is drawn for each constituency. And if your name comes up, congratulations, you're a member of parliament. You know what I mean? I think that could kind of break down the tribalism that exists.
So then, what would people vote on? Because you're not voting on candidates now. Are you voting? Are you voting on what you want your constituent to focus on most?
Yeah,
Sorry, your representative. Yeah.
Initially, people would have to vote for the system, but I get what you're saying. You know, furthermore, in future, it wouldn't be voting for an individual, would it?
Sorry, let me just be clear. There is completely an argument to be made for completely putting up the entirety of Parliament up to a lottery, where a person gets selected at random, minus a few categories, fine, from the national population, and they then run the country. Well, have a part in running the country. That absolutely is a political system that you can do just on its own, right? There is a case to be made for that. But then in addition to that, like, are you going to have these people arguing like the case of their constituents specifically, or are they going to be arguing just their take on their constituents where they live based on their district? Because the lottery is going to basically be based on each borough, right?
Oh yeah.
We're still going to have all the boroughs, but each from the population of each borough, you're going to have a random selection of who's going to represent that borough for the next 4 years, or whatever number, right? I would argue you probably want to do it a year, if you actually like. I see where you're coming from. I don't know if it completely deals with the issue of corruption because you can still do backdoor dealing.
Well, yeah, you'd have to have complete trust.
And also, what happens when the person that's selected, like, so in where I live, for example, there is a businessman who essentially accounts for about something like 20 to 25% of the employment of the jobs in my borough. What happens if he gets elected?
Well, yeah, fair one. I mean, it's a juvenile idea. I was just like,
no. Let me be clear.
It
absolutely is not juvenile. This is exactly like the kind of political philosophy 101 in the sense that these are absolutely models that you can run on.
I mean, it's just I kind of rank. So if you put randomization in, I think that it eliminates the chance of corruption more than the current system we have.
I don't disagree with you though.
Yeah, I mean, who could? Nobody can come up with a perfect democratic system because if they could, would already have it by now. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I can pitch some countries. This is what I was going to do. I was going to pitch some countries that I feel have got pretty close.
Go on.
So Switzerland.
Not familiar.
Okay, so Switzerland is and aspects of Australia, which I'll get to in a minute. Switzerland does pretty much their entire political system runs. They have very few politicians. Everything is basically decided by referenda. I think Switzerland is broken down into 5 districts that I've forgotten the name of. It's not important. And each district has its own set of referenda that are unique to its district. The legislature takes the decisions, and like people are very engaging in each borough with what are the issues for each borough, if that makes sense. I forget the system that is in play for how they have that interaction with their population, so that the population can communicate its issues, what it has a problem with, or what it feels needs addressing. They don't necessarily know what the solution is, but they know that one needs to be found, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So they that's how they decide that's how all kind of political decisions are decided in Switzerland. It's done by referenda. But the thing is, their entire political system is set up on that.
Yeah. So the only thing that, and I kind of see that as a referenda sort of basis for democracy. It is ideal, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
However, if you look,
it is a very close facsimile to the Senate back in the day for the city-states of Greece.
yeah,
Um, the not the Senate, sorry, the oh, I forget the name of the place where they did their debates on the issues of the day and then cast their vote. There's a Amphoria and Amphia. I can't remember now. I think it's an Anthria. I might be pronouncing that wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the
yeah,
stone
yeah.
pillars and the benches where they all sat in robes. Yeah,
So it would tend to. Yeah, okay, fine. This is a stupid thing to get hung up on. That's more me talking to myself, by the way. Yeah. So it's a close to a modern day take on that system, where it's an active democracy where each issue is voted on. You don't elect a representative to represent your interests. You make the decisions to represent your own interests, and it's
yeah.
it's a more direct form of democracy.
Go-
And when I mentioned Australia earlier. They have a mandatory democracy in the sense that it is illegal not to vote in Australia.
Yeah, I remember debating that. I don't know, it must have been fucking last year on PDC.
Yeah.
And that really like riled some people up. And like I kind of I can see the benefit of it. However, I can also see the negative of one, what sort of punishment you give someone who doesn't vote, and two, if someone really doesn't have a fucking clue, do you want them voting? It's
So
like,
I'm sorry. What do you think that's got to do with anything?
sorry, say again.
Forgive me, my friend, but what on earth does capacity to understand the issues have to do with anything?
Well,
I'll be honest. I think you've completely misunderstood the point of democracy.
no. So say if you let's look at the Australia piece, right?
Right.
Do you think it's right to force people to vote that do not want to do so by their own admittance of incompetence?
I think
So,
that,
for example,
I think they're allowed to deface their vote.
yeah, well, all right, yeah, that's a caveat, isn't it? Yeah,
No,
fair
it's
one.
not a
But
caveat. It's you don't want to vote. Fine, deface your vote.
yeah, but will people think outside the box that way? So if somebody,
I can guarantee you, there's plenty of people that do that.
yeah, but if you say to someone, right, you have to choose A or B. Oh, I don't want to choose A or B.
Well, then you
Well, you have to do it, or you'll be punished.
don't tick either.
Is that not quite totalitarian?
No,
Why not?
because you don't have to tick it.
So you don't think people
Sorry,
should
is
have
that
the
not
right option?
not totalitarian? Well, no more than only having two options on the ballot paper is totalitarian in any democracy or referenda.
Yeah, but
What
in
are
a
you talking
democracy
about?
referendum,
What the hell are you
you're not,
talking about? Sorry.
yeah, but you're not punished for not choosing option A or B. But in
Um,
that system, you are.
you're not punished for not casting a vote. That's correct. That's not the same as you're punished for not choosing either or. Different thing entirely.
I just think if people want to totally ignore the political system and continue paying the
Then they
taxes,
can deface their ballot, or they can not cast a vote, but put their ballot in the box. They just don't mark one, which they're completely within their right to do.
I mean,
But the
if
fact
that,
is, but the
if
fact
that's
is,
public advertised, if
okay,
that's public
yeah, okay,
advertised,
but
then
no,
I've got no
look, you have
problem
to
with
also you have to understand here the entire of Australia is structured to make this happen. Okay, they're like business effectively shuts down on election day, right? So you can go and do this.
it. Yeah.
They're like
How,
and just to be clear, ballot boxes are conveniently placed so everyone can do it with the bare minimum of inconvenience.
yeah,
Right?
fair enough.
We're not talking about like, oh, you're out in the arse end of nowhere. I see you failed to vote to jail with you, son. That's not what this is.
Yeah. So what? I don't mean to go total like sort of libertarian on it. However, if someone has no desire at all to engage with the political system, they don't recognise it as valid. Surely that person should be left to their own devices.
Why?
Why not?
Because they live in a community. They're making use of infrastructure. They pay tax.
Yeah, fair enough. And if they don't
So
want
that's
an input
why.
on that, that's why should they
Okay,
default?
but by virtue of the fact they exist, they do. If you live inside the borders of a country, you do. The strength of the currency you use is determined by the country that you live in.
Yes, but sure
You have reaped the benefit of that. I'm sorry, like this is citizenship 101.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is, sure, that citizen, if he is paying into the tax, if he's going about his daily business, not causing anyone no dramas,
Yeah.
if he doesn't wish to vote, if he just wishes to be apolitical,
Yeah, he could do that.
doesn't want to,
and he can do that, and he can do that with his ballot.
doesn't want to get the bus, doesn't want to drive, doesn't want to spend any of his own funds
They can
to go and spoil the ballot.
You can sign up for a free postal vote.
And
I believe Australia was one of the first countries to bring out online voting.
But
so I don't buy it. I don't understand what it is you're trying to pitch here.
All I'm trying to say is someone shouldn't be shouldn't be coerced into voting or spoiling a ballot or doing anything. If they want to be removed,
why not?
Because it's their own free will, surely. Well, what have they done wrong by not wanting to vote, or not wanting to fill a ballot paper, or not wanting to go to place A, B, or C to cast a ballot? I don't understand why they.
What have they done wrong? I mean, to take the draconian standpoint and the very right-wing authoritarian standpoint, they've broken the law. As for why
the tables have turned.
Yes. As for why that law exists and the ethics and morality for why it exists, that's an interesting question. And I'll defer back to what I said earlier. If you live in a society and you operate within it and you benefit from that society, then you are the social contract obliges you to abide by its laws, including if its political system is set up for you to mandatorily engage in it. Whether or not your engagement is divisive in the sense that you are choosing to not engage in it by not signing the ballot box or by defacing the ballot paper because you're not satisfied with the options available to you and you don't think the system is working, which historically is what that means. And again, I think if you live in a mandatory democracy, I would also argue if you want to be seen as not doing it in an authoritarian way, you would have to make this clear that you are required to put your ballot paper in the voting box. That is all you have to do. You can deface it, you can write your manifesto on it, you can not put anything on it, but at the end of the day, you are required to put it in the ballot box. That is it. And I don't think asking people to do that and making that clear makes it authoritarian. The other thing I was going to say with regards to compelling people to vote and whether or not everyone should vote, I used to work in health and social care, and the adult men that I worked with had severe learning difficulties, many of whom probably couldn't really grasp the concept of politics or what worked, or understanding what the issues were. Many of them didn't necessarily even know the value of money, if that makes sense. So for some things it did, for their capacity to understand certain things were at the point where they weren't necessarily capable of making an informed vote. But you're not required to make an informed vote. All I can do, and this is what I did, by the way, is say to them, an election's coming up, do you want to vote in it? If they ask questions about it, I would explain it to them in a way that was at their capacity and they were happy with. Just to be clear, none of them were interested in voting. Okay? Yeah. But if one of them decided to vote, I'd support them to vote. I'm not gonna query who they vote for. They'll ask questions. If they have questions, I'll answer. I might ask them, do you want me to work out who would represent your interests best? Because of the few service users I worked with who would understand this concept, I could say to them, do you want me to work out which party would best represent you because of your condition, for example? Because they had an awareness of their condition. So, and if they said yes, I'd work it out. I'd work out what each party's position was on it, and then I'd try and... This never happened, but this is what I'd agreed with my manager I was going to do. Let's just be clear. And then I'd work it all out. I'd work out what each party's stance on it was based on their manifesto, and I'd explain each key point in as simplistic way as I could to the capacity of the person I was supporting. That was what was agreed upon. Because, funny enough, this became a huge fucking discussion because the subject came up because postal votes came in, and then none of us really knew what to do. And then we were thinking about it, there's no reason why they shouldn't vote. It's their right. All these
Yeah, of course.
all these guys, by virtue
It's
of living here, and being UK citizens, absolutely
yeah,
have a right to vote. It's not for us to decide whether or not they can. So,
yeah, but
like, it's
it,
also not for us to decide how they vote.
is it? Would you say though it's not their moral obligation to decide whether they wish to vote or not?
If they live in a country where legally it's a requirement, yes, in the same way that I live in a country where it's a requirement that I wear a seatbelt when I drive, that is a form of coercion. I can't use my mobile phone when I drive, that is also a form of coercion. Like, coercion is not a dirty word, like, in the context
No,
of
no, I
politics,
agree.
right?
Yeah.
Like, the libertarian in you, and I don't really know what you mean by that. Because when you say libertarian, what are you referring to? Do you mean like
But
laissez-faire capitalism or hard or
well,
liberal values?
it's kind of a libertarian principle that you're free to your own, will within certain parameters.
Yeah,
And
that's fine,
I
but
think
yeah, but
by refusing to, because let's not kind of go around the subject. By voting, in
yes,
effect, for a certain party, that vote in effect will affect others. So, as a libertarian standpoint, if you refuse to vote, you're refusing to sort of impact on those around you and the populace of the country that you're living in. And I think to revoke someone's right to not vote is not something that I agree with. I think if you wish to be totally apolitical and you don't wish to be involved in the political system, yet you still abide to the rules and customs and you don't affect anyone else, then you should really
okay.
be
Well,
allowed not to
rules
vote.
and customs require you to put your ballot slip in the ballot box. What are you going to do? You're going to bitch about it being coercive? In which case, why are you
The,
not bitching about being required to put a seatbelt on?
yeah, but in that sense, would the seatbelts provided in the vehicle that you purchase. However, if you were
I'm sorry.
obligated by
Could you
law,
repeat that?
when you purchase a vehicle, the seatbelts are included, are they not?
Okay. Yeah,
Because
sure. But
that is the
where are
law,
you
yeah.
going with that,
But
though?
all I'm saying is, if you are going to be told to vote, then, for example, you live 3 miles away from a polling station, the government should cover your petrol money or your bus fare to that location to vote and then cover it back. I don't think that, especially in democracy, you shouldn't be forced to cast your vote.
Okay, so when CFCs were removed as a refrigerant from refrigerators, was the state required to subsidize every refrigerator manufacturer because they had to switch over to a more expensive refrigerant?
Sorry, I'm not familiar with CFCs.
Okay, so CFCs were chlorofluorocarbons, which used to be used as a refrigerant in refrigerators because of the its propensity to sublimate from liquid to gas. It didn't require the energy input for it to do that was relatively low, which made it really good as a coolant because refrigerators basically run on the principle of you compress it down to a liquid that increases the amount of energy density in that liquid in the space that you're trying to keep cool. So heat from that space goes into the liquid. The liquid then is moved away, gets transferred into a gas, at which point it's more inclined to dump its heat into out of the coils and into the surrounding atmosphere, and then the compressor pump pushes it back down into a liquid, and that's essentially how a heat pump works. CFCs were really fucking great at doing that, and they were really low cost. They were piss cheap to make and manufacture. It was great when it hit the market. Revolutionized refrigerating. The trouble was, if a fridge broke and CFCs got into the atmosphere, they'd go high up into the ionosphere and start fucking around with the ozone layer. And that's what led to the hole in the ozone layer. And then then worldwide there became a global ban on CFCs. Now my question to you is the state obliged to compensate everyone who was using CFCs, every companies are technically recognized citizens with the same legal rights as citizens in most Western countries. Is the state obliged to pay those companies for the switch over from CFCs to something else?
Oh no, of course not.
No, of course not. Okay,
Wait one. If the state was saying that you had to have refrigerators in your home, then yes. Did the state say you had to have refrigerators in your home?
I'm sorry. you do understand that, like, there are things in play in society that, in order for you to function within society, you are required to have access to. You are required to pay health insurance, right? We do
Yeah,
it. We do it in the form of single payer taxpayer. In the
yeah,
states, you're required. Well, actually, no. In the states, you're not required to have health insurance. Um, it's kind of how they make the money they do.
yeah, fair one.
But like, I'm just trying to think. Germany also has a single payer healthcare system, and I have a strange feeling. I have a strange feeling Australia does as well, except they also have a lot of private systems. It's I forget how Australia works
Well,
exactly.
I think we're the niche in a sense out in the UK that we do have universal. I think there's quite a
Well,
few
no, we have.
countries.
Okay, so let me be clear.
Thailand does.
Let me be clear. The reason I bring this up is because when you get your paycheck, a portion of it goes to national insurance. That
Yeah.
national insurance component is the single payer healthcare. That is you paying your insurance premium on your health,
Oh yeah, I
right?
understand what that is.
And you, if you are working, have to pay it.
Yeah.
So my question to you where is that not a form of coercion?
In a sense, yeah.
Okay,
However,
but so how do you feel the two are different between that and abiding by Australia's law for you to have to cast your ballot however you choose to cast it?
because we're going to need healthcare at some point in our lives, 99.9% of people.
And we aren't
Um,
going to need the state.
well, you're going to need the state, but whether you choose to decide what that state is or how it operates is up to you, surely.
I completely agree, which is why you have the option of defacing your ballot or leaving it blank.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not the same, is it? That?
Why is it not the same?
Because
What I'm actually trying to say here is it is as much of an inconvenience, if not less so, than having to pay national insurance or having to wear a seatbelt or having to drive a vehicle that is insured and taxed. Again, I don't know if Australia's that. And yeah, if you want to drive on the road, you have to have a taxed vehicle.
yeah, fair one.
Like, because we live in a society. Now, if that society decides, well, this is a compulsory democracy,
Yeah,
I don't see the I don't. I'll put it like this: I don't understand why libertarians have a problem with it. It seems like a really fucking like stupid thing to get hung up about.
I mean it's more of the principle than anything else. It. I
Oh,
I'm
okay.
playing devil's advocate. I'm
You're
playing
talking
devil's
about the
advocate in a
principle of
sense.
it. Like, who gives a shit
Yeah,
about the principle of it?
yeah,
Talk
but
about the real, actual fucking
Matt,
issues then.
Matt,
Yeah, go on.
I'm
Sorry.
playing about devil's advocate. So I'm not saying that this is my firmly held belief that you should not have to vote. However, I'm saying the topic started on prime democratic systems that we should really think about implementing or what we think would be beneficial to the UK. And I think enforcing votes is not the way to go. I mean, look at what's highest turnout that we had for votes. I think it was a referendum on it. It was about between 60 and 7%. Like,
For the
ima
referendum, yes, I think it was
yeah,
closer to 70. Yeah.
imagine if everyone was enforced to vote. Imagine the kind of sway that we could have got from that. So people that arguably, Leave voters didn't know what they were voting for, and Remain voters maybe voted out of prejudice. I'm just presenting two sort of sides of the argument. I'm not taking a side there. All I'm saying is, imagine if you had a 30% sway either way. Like, imagine if there was an 80% Leave majority by people that just turned up and went, oh, X, Y, or Z. Well, it was one or two choice, wasn't it? And I think it's not the right way to go about it.
As I said
It
earlier, there's ways of mitigating that issue, and I do agree with you that you do need to mitigate that issue by basically saying you are well within your rights to either leave it blank or deface it. And you can even state why you're defacing it. Because at the moment, if you don't vote, the way some stats organisations treat that is that you're okay with the status quo. So take the ambiguity out of that, because it works the other way as well.
Well, that's fair enough.
Because
I think
what would you say if you compulsively had to vote on that referendum? What would you say if 30% of the ballot defaced it?
well, I totally agree if people don't want to vote, and if it
No,
was
no. If 30% of the ballot defaced it, what would that tell you?
nothing.
No, it absolutely would. It would tell you for a start that they weren't happy with the fact that there were only two options on the fucking ballot.
Well, I think that's projection.
No,
What,
no, because actually, first of all, you're legally requiring people to vote. Secondly, the subject matter involved, because the statement keeps getting thrown around that this is the will of the people. No, you don't fucking know that. You don't know why 30% of people decided not to vote. You can't speak to those intentions. That would give you a far better indicator of intention. I'm just saying. I'm not saying you can definitively say what that intention is, but it would give.
Would it not tell you that 30% of people were forced to go there that really did not give a fuck, and the only reason that they faced the ballot is because they didn't want to get a fine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's
a completely valid position. Which I don't disagree. Which is why I preface this whole thing with you make it clear that people can do what they want with the ballot. They're just required to do it to place their ballot in the ballot box. So that's 100% turnout. There's a lot of options with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could draw a line with the saying that we are direct to the pause on this point. We're not going to find a common ground.
What on mandatory voting?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting one to draw a line in the sand on. With respect to bringing it back to the UK, I need to wrap this up, unfortunately. Though I will say, if when I get back, if you're up for a chat, I'll send you a message. I think John's back in as well.
Oh yeah, more than that.
So I'll drop you a line. But for the moment, I think we need to put this in as a part one, because I don't think we've explored it enough. It's good, but like I think there is a bigger discussion to be had about whether.
Oh yeah,
your salty suggestion was a really fucking good one. Genuinely, like I was halfway, like as you were before you completely brought it up, I was reminded of it because I think of how you were talking. It reminded me of it, and if you hadn't have said it, I would have brought it up. But the other one I would suggest is the referenda. You completely restructure the political system to support referenda politics. And there's ways of doing that, and I would suggest looking at the Swiss model if you want to see how to do that. As for and I would argue that's a more direct form of democracy than a representative form of democracy, which we currently are in. I mean, there's a few caveats to us being a representative democracy, such as first past the post and shit like that.
Yeah.
And I agree, there are structural issues with my feeling is that the current system is not suitable for the way the country currently is.
Well,
and I would also argue the current system is not conducive to basically representing the representing the vox populi in as a representative way as it currently does. At the moment, it's bipartisan. Well, it was very bipartisan, and you were very limited on your options. So you pick the one that fits best. That's not representation of what people actually want. That's people making compromises on what they consider is most important.
Well, yeah, and bolstering to that point, it becomes convoluted once the vote's held. It goes through two chambers.
Not if you do the Swiss model.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about our model that we've currently got with the House of Commons and the House of Lords. It becomes convoluted in the sense that it's passing through two screens where
I'd argue it's necessary to have those two screens for the same reason you pitched the argument for why the monarchy should still exist in relation to the army and the police pitching.
Yeah, the only difference that I kind of draw there though is that the army and the police are enforcement agencies. Then they're not really.
Sorry, the inland revenue isn't.
Well, yeah. To be fair,
they're a coercive enterprise. The border force isn't.
They don't have the right to take your life or freedom. That's the only line I draw.
No, but they have the right to take money from you. Which, as a libertarian, I would have thought you'd be completely concerned with.
I think you're putting me on
property rights, sir.
Get off my property. I'm not so much of a libertarian. It's more of the.
No. Let me be clear. I'm saying that as a joke, simply because it was I thought it was an appropriate joke to make. That wasn't a joke.
No,
it was just property rights. I thought were a big deal to fucking libertarians.
No, I get you.
So yeah, how society structures itself, and how people want society to be structured, and the issues that people feel are affecting them. I don't think is currently accurately represented in the political system as it currently stands in the UK.
I totally agree.
But then there's caveats I would add to that, which is that unfortunately might does not equal right, so to speak, and democracy is essentially that argument.
Well, yeah, it's been.
But we have ways of mitigating that. So, for example, protected classes. If 90% of people voted against the recognizing homosexuals as human beings, for example, that is not a mandate to make it law because we have protected classes. So there are ways of mitigating the tyranny of the majority, so to speak.
The fact that protected classes have become protected classes is by democracy, though, isn't it? And the system that we've had.
I'm not sure if that came about because of democracy.
Would you not agree? I think that
I don't.
The consensus
in all honesty, I don't know. It would be nice if it was the case, but I honestly don't know.
Yeah, in effect, the laws were passed that said this class is now protected. You can't prosecute someone for their sexuality.
Yes.
So,
but just to pitch it to you, the House of Lords could have added that amendment. And then brought it back to the Commons saying we're only going to clear this if this is the case. This is the reason why I think the House of Lords is necessary, or at least a institution like the House of Lords. You do need a technocracy to oversee potential ramifications that the layman, and I include the House of Commons in this, fails to anticipate.
Yeah. Then there is the argument, though, that the House of Lords are almost not protected class in themselves, but they're from a certain kind of background.
That certainly used to be the case, and for a large section it still is. But
by the current the system we have, which is you can elect peers by pure party membership for X amount of years. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, completely.
It's
not like look, it's not perfect, and improvement needs to be done. And this isn't me even advocating for the House of Lords. It's just me advocating for sometimes you do need a second pair of eyes, and sometimes that second pair of eyes needs to be someone who actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout.
And you can call that the technocracy if you want, but it's necessary. Although with that said, if we're going for the model that you suggested earlier, where it's sorties, you're just selected by lottery, you would have to simplify every single issue so that a layman could actually speak on it and understand it and can actually make an informed decision on it, which I would argue would really simplify politics. Whether or not you could run a state that way is an interesting question. I like to think you can set it up. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, you'd need to kind of have a decent confidence that the rest of the electorate was capable of critical thinking. You know what I mean?
And I agree. And there's ways of ensuring that, but it requires you to enforce laws and put laws into place that reduces things like economic inequality and education inequality. And this country does not have that by any stretch of the imagination. There are countries where it has worked. There are countries where that do have that. Switzerland is a prime example. And yeah, they are all able to be informed, and they are, proud of that.
Yeah.
Whereas, what was it? We've had enough of experts getting it wrong. Was that not a phrase that did the rounds?
Oh, that's always been a party line for as long as I can remember.
All right. Well, fuck critical thinking then. It's how I.
No.
No. I'm not. This isn't me saying you. This is me saying, well, that's a litmus test for the country there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm going to tentatively say this. I don't think we live in a country where the ability to think critically and the ability to have a discussion and be questioned without reacting with anger, that isn't our culture. And in order for that to become our culture, you can be damn sure there's going to be a lot of vitriol against that. Talking about it being the fucking thought police, talking about it being suppression of free speech, because we'll dress it up that way. Because it's not actually a free speech issue. What it actually is you are responsible for the fucking stupefying of the nation. You can fuck off. Alex Jones is a prime example of this.
I mean, what we're getting into now, though, is subjective versus objective, really, when we're talking about experts. I mean, let's look at
No. I was talking there, what I had moved on to. I understand where you're coming from, but want to counter that, there's the technocrat expert that you need, who is the second pair of eyes for law, and then there's the other point I made regarding how you become a culture and society that values critical thinking. Two different statements. I wasn't referring to the subjective nature of expertise. I was talking about whether or not one can value having one's views challenged and questioned. That's a different thing.
Yeah, but in terms of making law, you've obviously
No,
got
I'm
to
not
be
talking
able
about
to...
law now.
Right, sorry, you've lost me. I thought we were on
Okay,
about...
so the first 7 years of my life I grew up in Germany. I've got a lot of friends in Germany, and I'm more aligned with German culture, as in how the German approach to things. In Germany, you will talk about your salary at the dinner table with friends. Okay, you will talk about saving money. You will talk about politics, and you will have these conversations amicably, and you will have debates and dynamic and heated debates. But at the end of the day, it's water under the bridge. Everyone's just spoken their piece. People like to be informed in Germany. People like to be right in Germany, and they don't mind if they are shown to be wrong. Okay, there are other cultures I've been fortunate enough to experience where that is also the case. But I have to say this: in the UK, the general public fucking hates it.
Oh yeah, well I think...
And what I'm trying to address here is that societal issue.
Yeah,
And when you try and curtail those things, people start framing it as but free speech. No.
Well, I think we're getting into another debate here, but
we are absolutely. I completely agree. We are, but I'm not saying you have to agree with what I've just said.
I get what you're saying, Matt, because in my formative years, I lived in Germany from when I was 18 to 21.
Yep.
And by virtue of the role that I was doing out there, I maybe wasn't engrossed in German culture as much as you were, so I won't pretend to be an expert on it, but I can see where you're coming from on that one. But I think that the byproduct of like the puerile society that we have in the UK, especially when it comes to politics, is only because of recent events. I wouldn't say it's a byproduct of what's gone before.
So why do you think when Winston Churchill said the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter, why is that still true today if you think that it's a recent phenomena?
Yeah, I mean, well that's going on the law of averages, isn't it? That
What, you think on average British people were fucking morons then, but are more so now?
No. Put it this way, Matt. Put it this way, right? Let me phrase it in this sense. If me and you were to go to any high street in the UK tomorrow and start trying to engage people in political debate, say we did to 100 people,
yep.
How many of that 100 do you think would have a conversation like we've had today?
It's a good question. In all honesty, I don't know, I suspect. I'll be honest with you. I suspect it would not be that high, and I also suspect the police would be called.
Yeah, fair one. Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
Anyway, this has been a good conversation. Hopefully, we can continue it later. I'm afraid I need to end it here, and I'm sorry we couldn't quite conclude it properly. But I really need to go pick my partner up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem, mate. Really enjoyed it. I'll still be on after this anyway.
Yeah, I'll hit you a message up, and maybe we'll end up recording another one. All right.
Yeah, sweet. Really enjoyed it, mate. See you in a bit.
Me too, man. Bye.